Kia ora, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm sitting here with my friend,
Caitlin Gilliland.
and we hope you enjoy this conversation. There are people in this world that you meet randomly or you see randomly, and you're like going through the world and you see so many different people every single day, but then there's people who stand out more, or there's people in conversations that people will like mention names, and there are names that stand out, and then there are people that you also see who are with other people who mention that you should meet them, and you are one of those people in my life that I think I was meant to meet, and that's probably why I'm a little bit more like, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about today? I don't know. That's where we're at right now.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if that's a good thing, if that's a bad thing. We'll find out, I guess.
I feel like it's a similar feeling because your name's also popped up quite a bit since being in Aotearoa.
Yeah. So we've like, obviously, we have the centre person who hopefully will get on the podcast at some point, who's kind of like the centre of a lot of our worlds and bringing people together, but also being part of a program that has been running in all the different Matariki groups here as well. So that's something that we can get into at some point. But I'm really stoked to be able to talk to you today for hopefully just over an hour of amazing stuff.
Yeah, we'll see where the conversation goes.
We'll see where it goes. Yeah, so how has what actually brings you here? Like, how did this all, because I mean, there's really cool things about this country, and then there's really cool people that you'll meet as part of it. But then, like, to see something, hear something about a country, and then to actually decide, no, that's actually where I want to go. What was kind of the driving factor behind that?
Ooh, I feel like that's a big
It's huge,
story.
yeah, but we'll get into it.
So it was the driving factor at that time. If I'm going to keep it short and simple, then it'd just be, was at a time in my life where I was just kind of going with the flow and doing what felt right. And then because of the people that I met, for me, it was just something that kept coming into my mind and saying, okay, go for it and just follow the flow and step into the unknown. And for me, everything was completely unknown.
Was there any, like, so, because to have that sort of comfort within yourself or trust within yourself to know that, like, going with the flow is going to be a safe option, but also like, oh, wow, that's quite exciting for me. Because for me, if I think about go with the flow, I like get nervous. I feel like I need to go to the bathroom. Like, how did you, like, how old?
Go to the bathroom.
How old were you when you decided that was kind of going to be a philosophy of life?
So I think so, like, while I was at university, I was always that person that, like, had something lined up. So it was like I always knew 6 months down the track I was going to be doing this or I was going to be there. So then I really wanted to step into the uncertainty, and I didn't want to have my whole life being mapped out.
Right.
So then that's kind of why I flipped it and was just like, okay, we're going to come to Aotearoa. We don't have a job lined up, not 100% sure on the visa status, but we'll just see what happens. But it felt like really right, and I needed to be there, and I just had to be open to the learnings and the teachings and the people who are going to come into my life as a result of that. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's really cool. It's kind of commendable because there's going to be a lot of people, or even myself I've talked about myself, who, you know, probably could have opportunities to do all that sort of stuff, but have never had the belief in myself to actually go through and carry that sort of thing out. So you talked about uni and things being planned out. So while you were planning things for yourself, what was the kind of, like, high school Caitlin thinking about where you wanted to be versus where we are now? So what was actually the plan when you were going into university?
So the plan going into university, I think it was constantly changing. I think at this point I probably would have imagined myself still living in Nunavut. But just the timing for that didn't feel aligned. I definitely will go back there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't so much like a career space because I was studying international development, and then in itself, it's quite flexible because you can put your feet in a bunch of different doors, and it can open up different things. It was just more so like I had always had like conferences or just like internship opportunities or just like projects more so planned rather than, okay, this is my life in terms of career-wise. It's going to look, because international development is just so vast. You can't really, I don't know, for myself, put a title onto that. Yeah,
for sure. And that's like like you said, it's vast. There's so many different things that you can kind of go through. Like it's a very broad spectrum of things that you can cover. So to actually go into like that field of study, what was the interest or what was the kind of drive behind that?
Yeah, so I think for me, I felt like it was a degree that made me into a better human.
Right.
Just because of the different perspectives that we were being exposed to. It really made me question a lot. And I think sometimes too, maybe more was more high school, that's like you're really taught how to memorize and not really how to think for yourself.
For sure.
So I think that's why I really appreciated those professors and the students also just, again, very values aligned. We also had a lot of international students that were in that space. So we're constantly being exposed to different perspectives and the richness of those classes, which I really appreciated. So I think more so the people and just kind of understanding systems a little bit more and being like, ooh, okay, this is how everything's fitting together.
Right. And then in terms of upbringing, like, was this something you were kind of always aware of, like that there were multiple perspectives in this world, and that you weren't just kind of a product of everything that's just in your, I mean, you kind of are a product of everything that's small there within you, but until you're exposed to different things, do you get those different perspectives? Or were you kind of just like, this is all we know, this is all we're going to know? Or where were you at on that spectrum?
No, like I think my family and stuff like that were always open and stuff like that in terms of our learning. It was never of this is the one way. It was just kind of like here are different perspectives to kind of be exposed to, but again allowing me to kind of move in the ways that I wanted to go. So yeah, I would say that those values were always kind of inherently there. But then I think maybe for myself, I guess we're going into a different conversation.
That's fine.
So like Canada does a really shitty job in terms of talking about our Indigenous histories. So it wasn't until I was in university when I was sitting down in that first lecture where I was sitting and I was like, what the fuck? Like, how did I not know about any of this? And then that's when I kind of really changed my degree in the sense of not just trusting what I was learning in academia and being like, cool, I need to go out in community and I need to make sure that I'm learning from community that's supplementing because this education is not enough.
Yeah.
And then that's when I, kind of changed the way that my degree looked like. And then also I think through my learning, that's when my family was also, we were all kind of going on that learning journey together.
Fantastic.
In a sense of being like, hey, these are things that I'm learning. Have you heard about this? And if you haven't, why aren't we having these conversations and really bring that to the dinner table and stuff like that?
I rate that because like I've always said that it's the informal learnings that you get from actually having experiences with the people that you've spoken about in academia. So like you get a theoretical background, but that's all you can learn when you're actually sitting down in a lecture theatre learning from someone. Because that's awesome to know, to have some sort of background knowledge, but until you actually like step foot into the places where you're like, oh, okay, that's how it's actually applied.
Yeah.
We can only apply so much theoretically, but when you actually go in there, that's when you get the real learning, and that's when you start to see, okay, these should actually supplement each other. And I always talk about like us in clinical settings and all that, like that's how we understand how it is to connect with different people. So for you, as you were going through, like were there any opportunities that the university like set up for you, or did you have to go find your opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a combination of things. So I was really good at finding like grants and scholarships in order to be able to have the opportunities that were available. So that's actually how I went to Nunavut for the first time, was through applying through a grant and also through a university kind of program that they had, and then just maintain that relationship with the community, and that fundamentally changed, the person that I am today, and really, a lot.
So there's two points that I want to go on. The first is your family going on a journey as well.
Okay.
So as you're going through, like, was that something that your family were on and then you joined it and brought your knowledge to it, or is it something that you became aware of and then wanted to have your family involved with?
I definitely think there was exposure that they had, but like I said, Canada's like the history in terms of the systemic process that they take not to include the history. They only knew what they knew. So then as I started to learn more and started to get more into community, it was just, hey, these are the things, these are the books. I want you to come to these events with me, and just getting them to come out to those things. And they were always very open about it. I think exposure is really important. And then again, giving them the education too of like when you're hearing certain stereotypes that are being talked about, okay, let's break that down. Where is it coming from? And how do we talk about that and call people out on that? Or I'd say call them into the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's okay, because this is a conversation that we definitely should have. But also the calling out, like, it's really difficult now. Like, how do we actually have these conversations? Which is one thing, because it's easy for us to get really, really angry. But then for people, like the easiest step to take is once someone gets angry at you for doing something, just to get defensive and then to not make that change because you're like, they're an angry person. But how do we actually like bring them into the circle to help learn through this together? Your family's position in all of this, so like in terms of being aware of it and then being receptive to it, like they were happy to, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then so it's interesting because I heard it for the first time when I heard Indigenous people from other places talk about Aotearoa, and then they're just like, wow, you guys have so much set up here, you guys do so much for your Indigenous people. And I was like, as someone living here, I was just like, that's so interesting because we don't. But from outside, it must really look like that because we have a treaty, we have all these things set up. But we thought we had the same thing about like Canada, where like it's always like they have these chartered, blah, 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 blah. But interesting to hear you now talk about the history. Like it's very similar to what it's like growing up here. What do you think that is in terms of people protecting like maybe it's the nationalism of the country? I don't know. Have you ever been aware of that? Like what were your perspectives of this country before coming here?
Yeah, so I definitely think I had those rose-colored glasses
Yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
in the sense of like back home, you always hear about Aotearoa and talking about the relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and being at a level that Turtle Island, that's also what Canada is known as, should be inspired to be like. So I was like, again, where is this narrative coming from?
Yeah,
So when
yeah,
I
yeah.
came here, I had that kind of in the background, and then quickly those rose-colored glasses were gone. I was like, yo, like similar challenges, a lot of struggles that are here as well, but I just think maybe it's the public relations in terms of like how things are being marketed or advertised. And also I just think you can't compare, because it's just that comparison too is gets into a tricky situation. There's different histories. There's definitely similar colonial tactics and histories that are used there that we can see. But yeah, difficult. I think I like it more from the perspective of how can we learn from one another in terms of the different initiatives or that solidarity that's happening across.
For sure. Yeah. And now your community involvement, and then you talked about actually maintaining relationships and then seeing how those relationships last over a long period of time. Now that's something that for me is quite important in terms of sustainability of stuff that you set up, because it's really easy to put things into place and then be like, oh yeah, 3 years it's doing well, blah blah blah, and then once like your funding runs out or whatever runs out, or you don't want to be there anymore, like you come out, and then that responsibility falls on someone else who probably isn't ready for it. And then what I'm trying to say is, in the long term, the initiatives that we set up for short periods of time to see if it worked, don't actually end up going. And a lot of that is because of the relationships that were set up. For you, what did you have in mind when you started working in that community space?
Like in community in general, or are we talking about a specific
So
community?
like when you started working with specific communities to try, what did you feel that your role was when you do go into community?
Oh, just like mostly to learn and just soak everything in, especially if I'm going into a community that I'm not from. It's just that grounding period of, again, the relationships are so important. If I'm even being in Aotearoa, like the relationship that I have with Korohata, like that has helped so much in terms of my learning and being able to unpack a lot of things. And when I compare that to my experience in Nunavut, I didn't have strong relationships with the elders, but really strong relationships with the youth. Right. And I can see how that impacted programming. And then when I'm over here, I'm like, wow, look at the difference in terms of when I'm looking at those community initiatives of, again, it's so important to have buy-in from every part of the whānau, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's something that I just cannot, you just cannot overstate that sort of stuff, because, I mean, if you are developing someone for something, in any other place, you do talk with the people who are going to be delivering the end service or receiving the end service. But for some reason, when it comes to, like, putting large pots of money into particular groups, they're just like, we should do this because we think it's right. And then they wonder why they never end up being successful. And it's just like, because you never consulted the right people 100% when it came to that. And now you touched on something which I think is probably quite important, and that's that humility that you have and being ready to learn. How have you always been one of those people who's like, you're ready to take on knowledge, or you're just ready to be a sponge in most instances?
Yeah, I was going to say the sponge. Yeah. I feel like I'm just a sponge, always trying to like soak everything in. And just honestly, just even grateful to be in that capacity to be able to even hear the stories. And that's just, grateful to be in that space.
And in being in those spaces and actually being, maybe just being kind to yourself and knowing that, because you're always going to feel like there should be someone else in that space. Like you're like, I'm not the right person to be. Someone else should be doing this. I'm not qualified to be speaking on this. How did you get past that conversation of knowing that, okay, maybe in this time I'm the right person for this?
Yeah, so I feel like whenever that self-doubt kind of pops in, then it's the people in community who I'm really close with. I bring that up and just say, hey, this is where my head's at right now. Can I just like talk to you about this? And then just having that open conversation. And yeah, I find that helps out a lot, because sometimes you need to get out of your head, and if you have those support people, they'll help you with it.
Yeah, and do you find that when you do verbalize it, most people are quite good when you do that too? Like they understand your position?
Yeah, and I think obviously that you can get into specific situations, but yeah, I think people are really real with that, of being like, here's the value that you've been adding, and then also like, let's look at other ways in terms of how can we bring other people within this, right? I think it's important. You need to be going to someone that's not only just gonna like stroke your ego, but also give you again real talks.
The real talks, and like avoiding echo chambers of like people who are just gonna back you up all the time. And then while you were, so kind of before you transitioned to coming over here, what were maybe for you working with different groups and then starting to see like you're establishing things, what were the most eye-opening factors to you? Not only for like, maybe for like systemic things that were happening, but also like the things that you started realizing, okay, this is actually a huge task if we want to have positive change for a lot of these things.
So the question, okay, I feel like there's a lot of questions with
There's
that.
multiple questions. Yeah.
Wait,
So for you, like
yeah.
going in and being that person, and then just like, because most of the times we go in with really awesome intentions to be like, I'm going to make a change.
But I always go impact over intentions.
Yeah,
because,
for sure.
Yeah.
But then the actual impact and being able to achieve those outcomes, what for you were like more eye-opening things? Because when you're young, it's really difficult to understand how overall systems work.
Yeah.
And then for you, actually seeing the reality of the situation.
I feel like I have to make it specific in order for it to like make sense and stuff, what you're talking about. So I'm going to Nunavut now.
Yeah.
I'm going back
Go
to
for
there.
it. Yeah.
So I think for us, so I guess if I'm giving more context, we were setting up kind of using art as a medium to have conversations about well-being and working with the youth there. So I think that was subjective in terms of when you're looking at what is an when we're looking at impacts, especially when you're working in that space. So for me, it was again making sure with the community is the one that's setting that, right? What are the impacts? Because it can't be, or the outcomes, like it can't. I think you probably see this a lot too, is when people come into community and be like, these are the outcomes that I need to satisfy, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, like, again, community needs to be the one that's leading, like every step of the way. And I just in the background, I just like supporting. And for me, it was getting those youth to be the ones who are setting those outcomes and then developing that and then just connecting folks and stuff like that. That's kind of how I see my role as more of a connector.
Yeah.
And that's the capacity in which I feel comfortable with.
And see, I think that's absolutely fine. And it's almost like all you need to do, because the answers, I've always believed, the answers actually lie within the community groups.
100%.
And all you're trying to do is just like, oh yeah, it's there.
Like everything you need is already there. The strengths are all there. And it's just, again, just pulling those out and being like, the capacity is all there.
Yeah.
And it's not an outsider coming in who's like, no, there's nothing. Like, I'm not. I'm taking so much in terms of the learning of being, that's what I'm saying. I'm so extremely grateful when I get to come into community, because I'm learning so much and I'm growing so much. So it's just, again, it's just how can I support? And if there's things that you think that I can bring to it, cool. But community ultimately has all the answers that are already there.
Yeah. Did you have anything in mind in terms of like being able to measure impact? Because one of the difficult conversations we're going through right now is measuring research impact. And for a lot of us, the impact is actually what change does it make at the like grassroots level, rather than like, oh, cool, your article got published in this journal, which probably has no trickle-down effect to a lot of the people that we're actually trying to make positive change with. So do you feel like using those words like impact and having this outcome is actually probably maybe deteriorates or takes away from the truth or the I wouldn't say impact or outcome again, but takes away from the positive what's a good word?
Well, I guess I don't know if I'm hearing the same thing, but how I hear it too is just like, depending on the community you're working with, the languages in which they're using, right? Because I find sometimes that miscommunication can happen. If I'm saying impact, it's like, again, what is it? What is that word within that language that's used? And I like to use the words or like the concepts from that community rather than me imposing my language onto folks. Does that make sense? Because
well, that's what I mean. It's like you're trying to bring a tick list of things to say like we've achieved these versus like what do they actually want from all of this interaction. And sometimes they don't even want that interaction. So how can you do it so that you fulfill your ends, and maybe you don't even need to fulfill your ends, but then it's just this weird conversation now because you're getting paid or contracts to do stuff. So like there's always that kind of negotiation between where you're coming in as someone versus what they've already got set up. So yeah, I don't know. That's still something that I think my entire career is going to be dealing with. But you're right. It's very context specific, and it's going to be something that you have to deal with as you go through that. Yeah, no, plenty to think about. When it comes to you thinking about things, where do you get to a point where you like, because when I first started researching, a lot of my stuff was like, I want to do this, and then I'd like question why I was wanting to question things. Do you mean like I was just so much analysis in everything that I was trying to do that I ended up not practicing what I should have? Okay. Did you ever have a moment like that?
I think, okay, so maybe I'm going to take this, I don't know if I'm on the same co-book
place.
Yeah, I'm like, so for me, so I only, like, when I was looking at potentially doing a master's, one of the reasons why I decided not to was, again, I wanted to do something alongside Indigenous communities, but like really not aligned with my values, in the sense of a lot of the professors who were predominantly in those spaces were non-Indigenous, working in Indigenous spaces, and Yeah, in terms of like they would publish, they'd be using all the right language, decolonizing methodologies, all that kind of stuff. And then you go and like talk to the community and be like, cool, like what were the communities you worked with? So I'd message the community and get in contact and be like, tell me what it was like working with this prof. Like, I want to know. And like such a different story, right? And I was like, okay, that's not aligned. And again, like I find that the way that research is, like, who's it for? I don't know. And that was the kind of the conversation I was getting into. I was like, okay, you want to do this master's, but why? Like, what is it that I, like, how does it come back to the community that, like, again, I hate the process that I can only speak to Canada, but I can't see it. I don't know how it's here, but it's like, you come up with your research topic without community, and you then are going through that I'm like, whoa, like, that's so backwards. Community should be the one saying, hey, do I even want you to be the one doing this? If not, like, bye. So for me, that's why I've kind of stepped back, and I was like, a master's is not the place that I need to be in terms of that. And that just, No,
that's awesome. I think that's kind of where we were trying to go.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if that's what you were saying.
No, that's where we're at. And a lot of it is just like looking at, I think, always coming back to who benefits from all of this. Like if I end up benefiting more because I'm getting publications, I'm getting like my doctorate, all that sort of stuff, but like none of that
is going back.
Like I don't know how morally I could live with myself to be able to do that sort of thing. So that's kind of,
and then that system tries to produce that, right? And then getting you into that headspace, and it's like
exactly, because the way that you progress as an individual is like that. It's only as an individual, whereas when we try to measure research impact, I think that's where we're trying to come back to, is that for us, or how we, in terms of the worldview, for people coming forward and the impact that you're making, it's actually like, how does everyone get lifted in this, or how can I actually get under to help lift, and like not so worried about myself. But so it's just taking away the individual and starting to think actually community. And when you use community, it's not you as saving a community, but it's just like we're actually like, this is what's happening in the community, and being able to voice that. No, that's awesome. Cool. You met people to be able to come over to this beautiful country, and you met an amazing man who also, did you have any contact with Korohata before you were part of the Matariki? Like, so how did that conversation come about? Like, how did you actually see him and were drawn into that?
Yeah, so I think, so the first conference, I think we talked about this a little bit, was in Dartmouth. And then I think when anyone meets him, you can just feel that money. Like, you can just feel that presence, and you're automatically drawn. And then we just hit it off with the conversations that we were having, funny as, like just like instant connection. And then I had gone up to Nunavut after that, and then we kept in contact, would send like postcards and stuff. And then when he came back to Turtle Island, just asked him to do like a road trip and stuff like that together. I was like, if you're coming all this way, like surely do a road trip. And that was funny because I just got my driver's license and I was such a shit driver. He had to drive for most of it, 'cause I was like, and then you guys are driving on the opposite sides. So that was funny. And then we just met up with different communities along the way so you could exchange knowledge. And honestly, that was like the best road trip I've ever done with someone. And then when I went back home, I just kind of needed that time just to reground, because like I said, I just got back from up north and just needed to consolidate and understand all of the teachings that came out of that. And then, like I said, I just felt really pulled, and then called him up and just said, hey, like, can I live with you for the year? And he was just like, sweet ass.
He's always so chill about that. And I think you're right when you talk about the energies of different people. Like if an energy feels right, and this is hard to put into words or like write it in a document. So like if you're trying to write ethics or something like that, and you're like, sometimes you just create the right vibe, and that's how you know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, just listen to your intuition too.
Yeah, which is a difficult thing to put into like, this needs to be approved by these people who have no understanding of what you're talking about. So just back to some of those road trips and back to meeting the community groups. For you, being able to actually go along with, like, because I don't know how he does it, and hopefully, like I said, when I talk to him, he can talk about it. But for you, what were the main learning, like, it just as a fly on the wall, or just being part of that opportunity to be kind of exposed to those different things? What did you feel like in terms of your energy? Like, was it something that was just a lot to take in, or was it something that it felt like you were in the right place, or was energizing you, or
like when we were in back in Turtle Island and stuff like that? We were just meeting up with like folks that I had gone to school with and stuff like that. So then we were just going to their reservations. So I was like, oh, if we're on the way, like might as well like pop in, talk to their grandfather, and like exchange those stories and stuff like that. Shout out Jacob if you're listening. But yeah, so no, honestly, I think it was just really beautiful. I think whenever you get folks together in the room and then they're able to share stories and look at, also I think food is a really good connecting space of just being like, oh, we make this too, but we do it this way and call it that. Like, I think that's such a beautiful conversation. But no, it was good. Like, just good energy, good vibes.
Yeah.
I think he was laughing a lot because when you're driving into Island, obviously you have a lot of deers and sometimes moose. So like he'd always like, whoa. He's like, get the gun. Like, no, they're just walking into town. But yeah.
Man, it's so cool. And then, so yeah, I mean, to be able to take the plunge and to be able to say, yes, I want to move country. So you know, you talked about it before in terms of like just kind of going off the flow and seeing how it was. If you hadn't built such a strong relationship with Koro, do you think you would have made the move?
No, absolutely not.
Right. So coming at what like was a huge draw card for you feeling comfortable to be able to come here?
I think whenever I travel to a new country, it's so important that I have like community connections to those places. I don't like traveling to places that I don't know someone who's from there. Just to make sure that, again, you're being kept safe and then you're following the cultural protocols. And I just, for me, that's just like a very big baseline for me. Yeah,
because it really does keep you safe in both ways as well, like spiritually as well. If something's not quite right, or something you're living in a place, or you're living by something that doesn't align with your values, it really easily takes away from your overall, like your whole order, because you don't really know, you have so many kind of confusions in your mind of like, where should I be? But like, even if you don't interpret it that way, your body feels it, and that's like I said before with energies. So coming over here, did you have any intention of what you wanted to do? Because you didn't have a job, you didn't have anything. Were you thinking about like studying or? No,
I don't like those international fees though.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Okay, right. Yeah.
No, so I think I was hoping like if I could find a job within my field, I was like cow pie. But if not, it's like all goods, like cafe shop, like that's cool. Like, but I was really lucky. Was able to find a job within my field like right away, and again, that was through those relationships that was able to open up those doors.
So what type of work did you come into when you came? And are you still doing that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So that was with Whakaruruhau,
right,
which is the Māori-owned non-for-profit in Saudi, and lots of really cool activities that they have going on. So yeah, they kind of took me in. It was like, what are your strengths? I'm like, They're like, okay, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Because I mean, like I said, when you first moved here, I just remember the stories. Like I'd go for cuppas with Koro, and he'd just be telling me that you're like, he said he hasn't met anyone this busy in ages. Was that just like the nature of the job, or were you still like doing multiple things as well, or are you just driven to just work like that?
I guess because I still had stuff back in Canada, right. So in the time zone, they kept forgetting about the time zone. They'd be like, Keelan, what time is it? I'm like 3 a.m. All good. But yes, then I just kind of kept that's why there's the early Zoom calls and stuff.
So now talking about coming in and being involved with this, and then did you ever have those conversations with yourself where you're just like, should I be the person like doing this work, or were you just like, no, that's cool, I can come in and help as well?
In terms of working in Indigenous spaces, be specific with your
sorry.
So I think 100% I've had those conversations with my boss in the sense of being like, hey, let's sit down, especially with the first couple. I think after we always had monthly check-ins and being like, hey, do you think that I'm the right person for this role, or do you want I think I was the only that was working in the Canadian as well that was working in that space. So I just wanted to make sure, again, I think it's really important to have those open conversations. And then at that time, what my boss was looking for, she was like, I want you to do like the IT stuff. She's like, I want you to help out, get us a website, do that stuff. I'm like, cool, I never done that before, but I will. I was like, are you? I was like, cool, I can figure that out. And I think, again, for me, especially when I'm working for non-for-profits, I always look at it as like, what are the jobs that you don't want to do, for coming with the grant writing or things like that. It's like all support from the background, so you can be out in community doing the things that are impactful and meaningful, and like do the mahi, and then I'll do the work that's just no one.
No, that's the thing, because that's the stuff that we have so many amazing people who can do all the stuff all the time, but then like to keep things afloat, like you have to do all the admin stuff that sometimes like is very necessary, but sometimes it like takes away from the energy that people can put into doing the stuff where they flourish.
And especially for non-for-profits, because it's like you're dependent on grants, so it's like one grant to another grant, and then it's like to write that grant, it takes away from the programming that you're doing, because you have to sit aside and then do that, right? So it's like, cool, if I can help and support in that way, all good. Like,
and then because also part of this as well, you get to be exposed to a lot of the stuff that the people are doing on these as well. So what have been things that you never thought you would get the opportunity to do by being in this group?
Like honestly, so
So
much.
yeah,
like,
we'll just go through it all. 'Cause I just want to see what
so
you're-
like we've had like te reo classes, so obviously I've been immersed within that and working on that. We had our Ruku Kai program, and that was really cool in terms of being able to hop on and help out with that. I'm trying to think my Wayatas. We're still working on those.
Oh, yeah.
My Hattori says it's like a flat ass, and I was like, I know. I was like, I know, but it's okay. We'll try. We'll be in the background. I think also too, like, seeing again back to the systems and stuff like that, because we did a lot of work with Rangatamariki and just being able to see the shit that Māori whānau are going through because of the systemic racism that's put into place. 100% eye-opening, and again being able trying your best in terms of how do you support within all these things, and what do we look at, and who are the people that we need to get in, or the conversations, and so like again being exposed to those systems of oppression. And
now, because I mean, I don't know if you read comments on anything, but Facebook and stuff is where we're starting to see, or like obviously with some of the stuff that actually happens as well, and you're just like, how did that get pushed through? Like, do they not understand that that's fundamentally racist? But then you actually start to see that there are, because we're in these spaces, we live this sort of thing all the time, so we don't believe that anyone would think inequity was a question. We just assume that most people would understand that that's the way it is. But because not other people are affected by it and they have the privileges of not being it, when you like come across that sort of thing and you start to see it like a bit more overtly, because usually it's kind of like a quiet kind of insidious thing in the background that's just working at hand, but now that we're exposed to it and we can actually see it, for you, like because this is something that it hurts a lot, my first intention is just to like jump on it straight away and just like have those the call out thing like you talked about before. But for you, has there been any like more effective ways that you find about going and trying to make that right, or like turn it around a little bit in some people's minds? Or
okay, so now we're talking specifically with people and when we're seeing like acts of racism that's happening. Like I'm quite comfortable like calling people in and stuff like that to the conversation, because I think the way that I've reframed it is that like if anyone's doing that to anyone, if anyone's doing that to me as well, because I think that's also really important, is that it's coming from a loving place. If someone's taking the time and the energy to even have a conversation with you about that, like that's huge, because that's a whole emotional burden that comes with that.
Sure.
So for me it's like I'm fine to have that conversation, or I really like to, if it's someone that also I think of certain professional spaces that you're in, it can be really difficult sometimes, especially if it's like happens so fast and you're like, wait, did I just hear that? So then I like to come back to that and just be like, hey, sorry, can you tell me more about what you just said? What do you mean by that, right? So then it's like you're pulling it apart. So then after, I'm getting everyone in the room to kind of stop and reflect, and then giving time to like, okay, we need to review this. I don't know if that really answers your question.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's the comfort in being able to do that, because I'm still someone who I know it's wrong. Yeah. And then like I have this difficulty in trying to like, how do I phrase it? Because I just feel like this is directly like pointed at me. But my first like instinct is to just be hurt and go through all the emotions first, and then try to feel for that person, but without actually making the change. I don't know. It's
but I think it's also important to know like we're coming at it from different positionalities. I'm coming at it from, it's not specifically my identity that's being attacked, so obviously I don't have that same emotional connection that's coming to it. So the advice I'm giving is mostly to non-Indigenous white folks, in the sense that like if you're in this space and you have your friends and your family or whoever are random, like you are in a position of power where you should be having those conversations and pulling that out. That's a completely different conversation for people of color. Right. So I'm not imposing. Yeah, no,
that's cool. And I like that you're really aware of that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of your awareness of different, like, because awareness in general, do you think,
because it might not be safe as well, right?
Because that was my question, and that's why I have to go through that barrage of emotions, because I'm just like, if I do speak up here, like, what are the consequences for me? Right. I feel
which would be a very
So you see these are the things when you talk about like you like to question things, and it is because you have to go through the multiple layers of different things. There's no yes or no. There's some things that are more correct than other things, but there's no real black and white with all of this. So for you. And in your time here, maybe this is a really huge question. But for you, in terms of like how you're starting to position yourself, or even just like your main reflections at the end of most days, what do you feel like are your like driving values for as you go about your mahi?
Okay, wait. So what are my driving values?
Yeah,
in
so
just
like,
general
what are the things
for-
that you keep at the forefront
Yeah.
of your mind when you're stepping into most spaces that you go into?
Okay. Oh, I was just thinking about values recently. Okay, so okay.
It's you. No.
Yeah. I think for me, honestly, authenticity is huge. I think it's really important that we stay grounded, and then again, like, bring your whole self, and unapologetically so as well. I think that's something that's really important. I think transparency is something that I really value, because I think, again, with conversations that we're having, or again, how we're meeting people, being transparent where we're at. Those are like the top two things that are popping in
Those are
right
really
now.
cool.
But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
also like curiosity, as you know, I'm really curious about things, and also being opened. I think those are inherently connected.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that final one. Can I just
Yeah.
say, when I first met you and the conversations that we had, it was awesome. It was the most talking I had done in so long, but it was the most energy I'd had after a conversation in so
Okay,
long.
cool.
Because
That's
it was
good.
like
That's
there was
good.
like someone actually took a genuine interest in the stuff that I was doing, and like not like a, oh yeah, cool, well, how's your day, like sort of thing. It was like you actually made me explore ideas that I've had in my mind that like I just do for work, but I've never like properly looked at it and actually examined them in that detail for the longest time, probably since like before I started work. So that was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, and I don't know like how you protect your energy in that, because being that way and also, you know, pulling up to the table every time like that, it must get to a point where you start to feel drained. Or do you?
I think Kurahata has helped a lot with this, actually, because
Okay.
in some of the spaces of Mahi that I'm in, we've had a lot of conversations about, and especially what he does, right? Like constantly. So that's a conversation of how do you protect your energy, or what does that look like within different spaces. So
Yeah.
I don't know, some things that he would share for Kurahata is like karakia is something that's really, really important, just checking in with yourself. And you can do that in your head too, if you know a difficult conversation is going to happen. Just kind of like talking to your ancestors and being like, hey, can you help guide me through this conversation? Yeah, I don't know. I think everyone has kind of different rituals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then some people say too that they imagine like a white light around them. Again, that's a different like conversation stuff.
Right.
But yeah, just whatever works for you.
Do you have any like that you do specifically?
It just depends on the space or the nature of the conversations. Like if I feel like if I'm going to need something, if I'm going into a really heavy day, then yeah, I'll try to add some of the things that Kurahata's like incorporate it within my practices and stuff like that. Or
Right.
if there's like a necklace from home and stuff like that, or just
Nice.
pieces of home or something that's sentimental to me, then I'll kind of bring that because I feel like that brings me energy or yeah, that sense of groundness.
But that's right. I mean, it's just like most people who they'll have rituals that they go through. So like before sport, for example, or
Yeah.
before like anything that's huge or anything that they feel like it's going to take a lot of energy, most people have their little rituals. And like you said, it's very correct that, you know, whatever works for them and whatever
Yeah.
has been working, there's no right or wrong
Yeah.
or yes or no. For yourself, in terms of like going forward and maybe like thinking about, you said maybe later on you'll go back at some point,
Yeah.
but for now, what are your main goals while you're here in Aotearoa?
Yeah, so I think because now I'm looking at applying for residency.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, oh.
I feel you.
So because of that, I definitely want to get more immersed in my te reo journey, because before I was like, I didn't see myself staying here longer. So I was just like, okay, cool. I'm just going to learn basics. I was like, okay, now that I know I'm going for residency, I was like, there's no excuse. And I actually like need to put the time and energy and make it a top priority. So that's something that's a huge intention on top of residency. We'll see how that goes. SOS if anyone's been through that process. And then honestly, like I just think continuing to try to be like my authentic self, because I think sometimes, especially when you're figuring out your identity and navigating different spaces, that sometimes you just kind of suppress certain things. So just kind of like, you know, just be open and just go with it. And yeah.
And on your reflections, and I don't know if you're open sharing this or if it's something that you've come to grips with a little bit with, but in terms of things that you would suppress, or are you aware of what you were suppressing and why you were suppressing it?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. So
Yeah,
are there any
100%.
that you are able to talk about? Or
Yeah,
would you
yeah,
rather-
all good. So recently I've just been more open about my queer identity. So that's been something that I've just been kind of navigating. I think also because I bounced around a lot, I never allowed myself to have like the time and space to really, and then also just like societal things coming into it. So I think, yeah, just being more open and just like having those conversations and not something that I feel like shame around, but it's
Yeah.
been something that I've just kind of been working through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Because I think those reflections, and the more that you are able to be that authentic self, whatever it is to you, the more you start putting energy into like being that person and like you said, bringing that full self, because you're not having to leave anything behind, and you're not having to hide a little bit because you don't want to accidentally, you don't want to accidentally bring it out, which uses way more energy than just showing up like, hello, I'm here, this is me.
And if you like it, great, and if you don't, all good.
Like, and this is something that, so when people do start to go on this journey, and this is something that, you know, I had to go through, a lot of people have to go through, but when they do bring that side of them, the people who thought they knew them start to say, oh, you changed, or like, who's this person? When you, like, did that ever happen to you? And then if you did, how did you kind of get around that?
I feel like my friends have been, like, I've always been the type of person that the friends that I made in high school, I was really aware of, like, you're going to be my friends for life.
I feel
like, I guess it's like I had a lot of family drama going on when I was in high school, so I didn't have the capacity to be friends with folks who, like, weren't at the same, like, like I couldn't do little drama. I was just like, it needs to be really real, and like I need to know that these people are going to be the people that I'll have for a long time. So I think from that, I was able to cultivate really strong relationships that those friends are the ones that are like lifting me up and stuff. But I have heard a lot of other folks who have gone through that. And I think for me, that's more of a reflection of their insecurities and where they're at, and then they're projecting that onto that other human. It's kind of like, ooh, let's talk about you now.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen. I mean, when I see people, you know, taking those steps towards being who they want to be, I'm just like fucking all for it. Like, heck yeah, bring that sort of stuff, because now I know you're not going to spend energy trying to put that part of you aside, because this is you now. And if people don't want to be there, so what? Like, what does that actually mean for you? Now, you've had awesome opportunities to be going, just like, firstly, being able to explore the landscape of this beautiful country. 100%. But then, like, has there anything that you've been a part of that you're just like, never in a million years would I have seen myself at this table in this conversation, or just like doing something like watching a sunrise somewhere? Anything that kind of sticks out in your mind?
I'm not going to try to overthink it, so we'll just see what's coming
just what's coming.
Just in terms of like something that's been impactful or new.
Just things where you're just like, whoa, I never thought.
I feel like I'm taking this again in a very different direction. So like, since being with Korohata 2, we've gone to a lot of tangihanga. So that for me was something that was really different, because I hadn't been to many funerals before. And just also just understanding the process has been like, it's completely changed a lot, because I've had conversations with my family in the sense of being like, hey, why is it that we have our funerals the way that we do? Like, I've been seeing here, and I was like, I really love like the intentionality of having a kai together after, and like, not to shit on what her family does, but I was just like, why do we have like little finger sandwiches and we're all left like super hungry? I was like, I'd love to get everyone together and like have those conversations. I don't know. And I like the process too of when you bring the dead back to your home and then being able to say the things that you need to say. And I was like, that's a really beautiful process. Anyway, so then it just opened up conversations then with my family of being like, maybe, I don't know if this is more, but just being like, hey, like, what is it actually that you guys want? And why is it that you want those things? That's because it's like what society says you're supposed to do. My family's not religious at all, but they were like, oh, we want to go to church. I was like, why do you want to go to church though? I was like, if that's not something that we've ever done as a family, then why is it then at the end of your life that's something we're going to then pretend? I was like, so if you want to be on a beach, or if you want to be somewhere else, or just like a very intimate thing, like why can't we have that? And again, I think sometimes like we satisfy other people's wants rather than what is it that specific person. So like, it opened up those conversations, and those were some really difficult but really meaningful conversations that we kind of left with, that I was like, wow. And that was because of that experience here and just seeing how things were done.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then being able to, so like having these conversations as well, and being able to talk with different people, do you get to a point where you're starting to see like, maybe not a change, but you're starting to see people becoming more just open-minded, or being a bit more receptive to a lot of different ideas?
Do you be more specific?
Like, so just like when you start having like, because these sorts of conversations, the reason why I'm so bored with all of this stuff is because I don't have enough people in my life who have such open conversations like this, where we're able to dissect and go into the different groups. So like, if I meet someone and they're able to just even go back one layer, I'm like, we're already further than any other conversation that I've already had. So when like you actually get into a space where you're starting to feel like this person vibes, like this person's actually open and receptive to any different idea that kind of maybe not opposes what they're already at, but slightly different from where they're at. Have you ever, like, are there people, or have there been conversations with your own family or people close to home that you've started to see like switches go off in their mind as you're talking?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
is that a good or a bad feeling?
No, I feel like it's good because it's like we're opening it up and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
Like switching off, like we're going on the same page. you
Yeah,
mean?
right, that-
Yeah.
Cool. No, because I just, like I said, we are so we're so surrounded by people who we're by the book. We're doing things like you said before to fulfill the outcomes or the necessary needs of other people, or
Yeah,
to make
100%.
sure that we either stay liked, and that's the like most superficial of it, but then after that it's to stay employed, or it's to stay on someone's good side so that
Well,
we
I
can
feel like even our age is interesting too, of like people having a map of being like, by this time I need
Oh,
to do
yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
And then just like also if we're looking at the dynamic of women too, of like if you've been in a long-term partnership of like, why don't you have, like when people feel, I'm like, how do you feel like you can ask that question? I'm like, that's really, anyways, yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So now because that's the sort of thing is like where we just have so many ideas of what's meant to be, and then
And then when you go against that grain, then people get scared because it's like, oh wait, what? How are you doing that? And
Exactly.
It's like, and then again, for me, I just see that as someone's fear because it's like, cool, like not all good if you followed that, but I think for some people when they see that, they're like, they see their own dreams that they neglected and
Interesting.
ignored, right?
Yeah.
And then being like, and then they project their fears that they heard because they weren't able to do that onto that friend or that loved one without I don't know.
Yeah,
That's just
I feel
something
you.
I've observed.
No,
I
but
don't
that's
know.
true, and I think that's because that's coming from someone who you're on that journey of like actually accepting yourself and accepting like this is who I am, this is how I felt, and I went through these different things. Some of them turned out to be great. Most of them turned out to be great. I had a few learning lessons along the way as well. But that compassion that you have towards those people who project towards you, I think that's the departure point between like where I'm trying to get to and where I feel like you're already slowly getting to, because I get hurt
Yeah, fair.
instantly.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So because I'm just like, why is this person going at me? But like to have that compassion and to be like, well, I feel like it's because there is a lot of hurt in you
Yeah.
as well. Like that's stuff that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So that's why these questions are coming out, and I'm like actually doing this more for a selfish reason to learn, because I'm just like, wow, it sounds cool. Like your processes for going through things.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So for you, when you are asking the different questions, is there now, this is the reason why I say this is because in different interviews, I
Okay.
have like different sorts of people call them butterflies.
Okay, yeah.
Where like
What butterflies are you getting?
no, like
Okay.
where you go to ask
Yeah.
questions and then like I have the split second of being like,
You're like,
should I
no,
have asked that?
I don't know.
Yeah, you're like, should
You're
I
like,
have asked that? Are there checks that you go through when you are like? For you, do you feel something as you're chatting to someone to see like this is the right way to go, or like that's the right thing? These are the right conversations we should be having.
I feel like that goes back to that energetic thing.
Yeah.
Like it's an energy that you feel of like, depending on, again, the questions that you're asking and stuff like that, of just you feel with the person and just be like, and then you can also, if I'm not 100% sure if it's like maybe like a very personal question, then I'll just add at the end and just be like, you totally don't have to answer that if you don't want to. But I just felt like, yeah, maybe if that's something you're open to talking about, and then just say, oh no, all goods.
and something that you came back to before, and I think a really disarming thing is actually having Kai. I don't know if you've like found that if you're actually doing something, because like right now this is very, I mean we're both here, but
Yeah.
we've got these headphones on, we've got a
Yeah.
microphone, we've got this damn system here, we've got a camera. So like I
I've
don't
been
know,
avoiding that.
Yeah, well I don't know how much that plays into the truth of what people can actually speak about. And this is when I think about research, and when we talk about finding the truth in research, I'm like, how much of this is actually for reals? Because we are still putting on some sort of face so
Yeah.
that we can come on and fulfill what you need from us. But like, so I don't know if that's, if there's a disarming thing, or if there's better ways of being able to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
This
the
is
answer
more
to
for
that. I was
myself.
like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. I was like, you tell me what you find out.
Yeah, I'll let you know as we
Yeah.
go through. But because these are like the conversations that I have with myself all the time. I'm just like, yeah, okay, we can get so far with these conversations, and some people will seem like they're very, very open, but at the same time, that's probably just enough before they feel uncomfortable doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you gotta feel that out. Yeah.
Yeah, we just got to feel that out. Sorry, I thought
No.
I'd give it a go.
No.
See how it goes.
That's all good. That was you testing it out. Be like,
Yeah.
no, I shouldn't have asked that.
Yeah,
no,
I'll be like, oh no,
no.
scrap that.
No. Fair.
So in terms of now for learnings,
Okay.
that so to be able to keep yourself up. Now, obviously, you have access to really awesome people.
Yeah, 100%.
But then at
Yeah.
the same time, you're probably going to be doing some stuff for yourself. Is there anything that you're reading or any kind of seminars that you go to regularly to kind of keep yourself up with the learnings, just general learnings across the board?
I feel like, I don't know, just the spaces I'm naturally in, I'm always learning.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm also that person. I would love going to like Facebook events and you see different webinars happening. I don't know. That's how I see like a lot of the ones happening back in Turtle Island, and that's how I kind of stay connected back home and stuff. So I tap into those when I can, but usually the times are like not ideal. But I'm like, oh, get those recordings. Yeah, I definitely like more spiritual books and stuff like that. That depends. The Power of One. Have you read that?
The Power of One.
Yeah.
Tolle.
Yeah. Have you?
Gotcha.
Did you like it?
It was. I think I was at the wrong stage of my life to be reading it.
Fair.
I was definitely one of those people who knew of the book, tried to read the book,
but just didn't get into
it.
I
wasn't there at the time. Yeah, I think I was like 20 when I tried to read it. So, yeah.
When you're ready. Maybe this is your sign to go back to it.
Maybe it is. Maybe. Nice. This is the energy thing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, cool. So those are the kind of the books that I'm vibing with right now. Yeah, I don't know.
Nice.
Just kind of,
Is there anything right now that's just like at the forefront of your interests? Like something that you're just like, oh man, that's cool. You heard about that and you're just like, I'm gonna zero in on that.
I don't know if I find it like cool, but something that I'm like, oh, I really need to invest more time and energy is just like financial literacy. I think is huge.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And then I think where I got like really fired up about it is just again when I was looking at more of the policies of like again when we're looking at systems and why certain people are in certain positions and whether you're looking at that from different policies and stuff that I was like, okay, cool, like this is why I do need to learn this, and again how that leads to empowerment or getting people to make choices, but again access to knowledge and access. But then also and I feel like that's been a big buzz too in terms of when people are talking about investing, but it's like what are the ethics behind that too, because then it's like if you're investing with a certain bank, if I'm speaking back to Turtle Island, and then they're also funding a mining company in Guatemala, which they most often are, then you're a part of that land destruction and the colonization of the land over there. So it's like you can't tap out and be like, oh no, I just invested it. And it's like, no, you're a part of the system. Yeah. So it's like you have to be researching and looking into that. For me personally, so that's just kind of something that's thinking about. I
think awareness of a lot of the stuff that you even like are involved in anyway. Like that's the sort of baseline knowledge of stuff so that you can make sure you know. I mean, firstly, that's your money. And like, where's your money going? But then also, because supporting things like systems survive because people buy into them, or whether they know it or not. So that's like, it's that sort of thing, being aware of it. And then also like it's taking that accountability as well to see where you are actually, recontributing even to the most basic level, just to different stereotypes by supporting things, saying things where you say like, for example, if you talk about, this is something that happens in sport a lot, where we talk about natural ability. And I'm just like, well, actually, that maybe physically they look this way, but they're also super hardworking. Like the work ethic is something that you never speak about with these athletes, but why do you speak about it with these athletes? So this is stuff that comes up, quite often, and it's, where are we placing our attention and where are actually starting to learn about that.
I think with money too, it's interesting of looking at like what is your relationship with it, and then looking at your household of like, growing up, how was money talked about, what was it look like, what were those conversations, and also then going deeper, what is that intergenerational trauma that's associated to, because that's a whole other conversation in itself.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember, sorry to take it personal, but when money was always, we're strapped for cash. We don't talk about money because it was always like embarrassing, because we didn't, like when school things would come around, we would just scrape by to get the money, and then it's just like, hey, we're going in a camp, like this is the money that we need. And I was always like nervous to ask my parents because I was just like, I don't know if we're going to be able to go. If then we can't go, I have to go to school and tell them that I can't go because we can't afford it, or then they're going to try to help us with money, and that was embarrassing. And now this is why, so now that I'm saving, like being able to save, I'm privileged to be able to do that because, I've gone through these different things, and I'm just like, I was at a point where I was so embarrassed of telling my family that I can do this now, because I was just like, they couldn't, like, it's just a weird,
how do you integrate that conversation now when it was like that one way growing up?
And we could never talk about it because we were always so nervous to be like, what hurt is this going to bring up, or what fight's going to break out, because we didn't have that conversation.
That's an interesting conversation in terms of now what that look like, exploring that, opening it up, because then that can also be perceived in different ways because of the trauma that's associated with that. So
and there's people, and it's like what I said before, where people are now starting to do things for themselves, and people look at it and it's like, oh, I think they're too good now. Oh, they can do that. Oh, well, okay. And then it's just like, you don't care. Yeah. See, it's all coming, all of this kind of like, if we had a pre-discussion and then came into it, we would have nailed it. I was just so all over the place. Now, so financial literacy is something but is there anything where you just like, you're learning, but it's something just totally like, oh, Like, that's quite an interesting thing, because, like, everything that you do kind of comes into who you are as a person. And I feel like it's going to end up kind of coming sooner or later, depending on when the right circumstance comes to you. But is there anything that just, like, takes your mind fully away from all of it?
Oh, like that I can be
Yeah, like, so that you're mindful of where you are, just to, like...
Yeah. So free diving is something that I've gotten into and stuff like that. And I kind of feel like it's like a meditative space too, because it's like when you're underwater, like, you have to be present. Like, you are there right now. You're not thinking about what's happening in the past or like what you have to do. So that's something that I really, really appreciate. And just also, like, because I haven't really been under the water really, that I'm just like, whoa, I'm like looking at everything. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
And just like, I feel like a little kid under the water, but also like insanely scared, and just like a good adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
But then really, really present and just kind of connecting, because you have to be so in tune with your breath and your body and everything that's around you. So yeah, maybe that.
And how did you get that opportunity to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Because, like, man, that's cool.
No, it's been cool. Yeah, so again, with Kurohata and stuff like that, his son was super into it. And then some of the boys would come up, and I remember I'd always be on the boat watching them. They'd come up with like all the kaimawana. I was like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was like, okay, like, take me out. And I was like, I gotta get the gears. So anyways, then I just committed and ended up getting the gears, and I just have been throwing myself into it, and it's a really beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Yes, but definitely when I get more women involved. So if there's any women who are also into free diving and want to take me out, let's go.
No, that'd be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, like, it's not only the experience of doing it, but I don't know if, you were talking about spirituality before, but, like, it's our relationship with, the atua of the different realms that you're going into. So for Tangaroa, and actually being connected and feeling connected. Like, when people talk about grounding and all that sort of stuff, it's always like, take your feet off, but it's like grounding with concrete and all that. It's not like actually what is the connection that you're trying to have. Like, it's a deeper thing. And I feel like once you're in that space that you're talking about of being scared but having adrenaline but also being mindful of where you are, that's when you start to see, like, because you're pushing a boundary slightly. And I don't know if you probably haven't, because you would have been with safe people, but, like, any experiences where you're just like, damn, okay, maybe not, or maybe, when you're being tested. No?
Are you asking me if I've had experiences like that? You're putting on the spot right now. I
Or
probably
even, like,
have that. I'm trying to think. I'm like,
or even, like, being tested by being out there and actually, like, being like, am I actually doing this? No?
I'm probably, it's not popping into my head right now. I'm like,
that's fair.
Give me an example. What's on your mind when you hear that?
Like, so when most people go into different space, like a different space or a realm of an atua,
okay,
I'm just there.
Oh yeah,
like, I'm not thinking that we are in the presence of something greater.
Oh yeah,
at that moment. So, for example, if I was to go under, and then you start seeing, like, the wonder of Tangaroa because you're there, but then because you have that scared thought where, like, I can't breathe under here, but also I have a job to do. Like, there are so many different things where it's like intersecting in this one point of, am I being challenged, or, like, is this something that I will get out of, or but at the end it's always enlightening. I don't know if you've had anything like that. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I almost drowned, but when you went under, you can, every time you come back up for breath, it's like you're enlightened because you just had another experience. Maybe I just looked into that too much.
No. I do feel like, so I think the dynamics, especially too, of like I've never done a karakia before going into the moana and stuff like that. So that's something that's definitely a new practice as a result of living with Kurohata. And I was like, this makes sense. Like, why wasn't I doing this before? And then also I think I've always been, like, low-key very scared of the water, even though I was a lifeguard or whatever else, but, like, I just be like, there's just, like, a relationship with that as well. So I feel like there's a constant, that balance of, like, again, when you're going and kind of, like, asking permission or feeling what's happening and, like, listening to the signals, and, like, again, when you're looking at the tides or then looking at Maramataka, they're just, it's a whole interconnected thing that you can get super into it. And again, depending on what you're open to and allowing yourself to accept those lessons that are there, of like, how are you gonna take that? And I can't remember who was the one diver I was talking to, and he was just saying that I think he had lost some of his gear, and he was like, I just took that as like, I constantly am able to take things from Tangaroa, so it's like that exchange, right? It's like that relationship, and if I lost that gear, that's all good. Like, someone else needed that, or that was what was happening that time. And it's like, for all of the kaimawana I've gotten, like, nah. He's like, my buddies were like, why aren't you mad that's here? And he's like, no. And I was like, I rate that.
Exactly. Like, I've been sustained for so long, and this is just like a small part of my I had the same thing. My cousin was like throwing some stuff back into the sea, and his favorite ring must have just like toppled off, kind of got loose a little bit, and then when he threw it, he saw his ring go. He was like, but like, that was we've all known that was his ring. You don't touch it, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But like his he just was so chill about it because he was just like, look at my bucket. And this has been my bucket for months and all the years that I've been doing it. This is a small part of me. Like that was my favorite part, but that's part of the reciprocity. And that's the reciprocity that I think we have for like all realms that we go into, right? So that's one more question that I want to get into before the final one. And this is also super broad because that's just how it be. But your reciprocity to people's energy as well. So now we talked about before about protecting energies. Like so we were more just like protecting your own energy when you go into a space. That energy that we were talking about, when you go in, do you feel like you know how to position yourself to like make sure you're not harming their mana?
I feel like that's something I'm still learning because it's like, when you
like, because you know how, I mean,
Yeah.
when we talked about it before, there are the consequences for me if I step out of line because I'm so passionate about something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, those people don't necessarily have to be bad people. It could be a conversation that just needs to be had.
Yeah.
Right? And there are always awkward conversations that need to be had because either someone's, like, just the nature of the role sometimes. But, like, doing it in a way, it's that balance again, but doing it in a way where we're not trampling them. And I don't know if you've become more aware of that now that you're more aware of your own energy, or
because like I still think even for learning how to protect my own energy, that's still like its own journey.
Absolutely.
So I feel like all realms within it is like still learning. But yeah, I think it's just, I don't want to say like yes, like no, because it's like no. I think everything within the capacity of what I'm doing is constantly a learning journey. But again, I think you can feel in the sense of when it's time to back away, or just like, hey, that's not the conversation for someone to be popping into and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm.
No, that's
we're
fine.
kind of speaking at a.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
we just go meta here, but I think the
yeah.
reason why I'm so curious and why I'm asking all these things is because I've had, like, I appreciate this sort of conversation where we just don't know. Like when I was doing science, everything literally, there was no yes, no answer. It was all, it depends. In this context, when these are the variables and this is the condition, this might happen. And it still might. It suggests that this may happen. And that's kind of how I operate most of the time. But because we're working with people who need answers, who need the yes, no, we kind of get conditioned to trying to give those people what they need.
Or come up with something that's like, you don't know. And it's like, don't say it, just don't.
Exactly.
Give me an answer.
Yeah. So
No.
I think that's why I'm so like intrigued by this conversation, and that's why I'm like seeing where your head's at just to see. But like you've been very consistent across it, so which is awesome.
But I like when you were saying earlier, like I think it's important that you do think about like how you feel in the presence of someone afterwards, and like just kind of check in with yourself and be like, okay, I felt really drained after that, and it's like why, like what's coming in. And that also I think is really helpful in relationships and stuff like that. Of sometimes when you have friendships where it's like sometimes like energy suckers of just like and it's just like keep track of that and just kind of check in with yourself, being like, how am I feeling after that interaction? And why is that? I think that's important.
No, it's absolutely important, especially because if you start to lose yourself just to make sure that these people feel good when you're there, and then I think that's all.
Or just like giving so much of yourself, and then it's like, okay, how are you sustainable then?
Which actually now, final question. No,
I was like, I had a question for you from before
because I've got. Oh yeah, go. Do you have one?
I was like, you're just like. I was like, whoa, how are you good?
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah. I was like, because like within the space and the conversations that we've been having, like with your healing journey, what are things that like have been the most impactful for your healing?
No, that's right. It's right. See,
for your,
we're so conditioned.
For your journey and like what's worked and like, I don't know, where are you at?
My huge thing has been, like you said, I've come to terms with the fact that I haven't been okay, and I've opened up to people about it, and just seeing that we can create communities, or not create communities. We're like, hey, we're all broken, but like by taking that plunge and being honest about who I've been and where I've been and the things that have been hurting me the most, and actually like facing my fear or facing the things that were hurting me. Yeah, that has been the most healing. It's like exposure to the things that I was hiding from, like a lot of the conversations or with family, and just never feeling like I was properly appreciated as a child. And that's why, so like obviously I managed to put it into a ball and harness it a little bit, but then there are times where the evil in that ball pops out a little bit. But now that I'm more aware of what those major triggers are, I'm actually like able to start putting in the processes, and the main processes have been just checking in with myself, and not putting so much reliance on other people to get me out, or for other people to, if I felt someone had transgressed, to have compassion for that person and not to think that that person owes me an apology, because I can't control what that person's going to do, but I can control how I'm going to be. But the main one has honestly been not compressing it anymore.
Yeah.
And actually being open about it. And if I wanted to cry, let it out. If I wanted to be emotional about something, let it out, but do it safely with myself, because there were other ways that I was trying to, because I was so hurt, I thought there was only a few ways out, because those are the examples of things that I had seen before. So yeah, I mean, it's a really, really curvy sort of answer, but it was mostly that honesty with myself. What are the things that are hurting me? And are there any things that I can do about that? And yeah, just putting those processes in place and being able to share it. I never thought sharing it with a bunch of people was going to be a huge avenue for myself to grow, but also to hear that other people resonate with those sorts of things. It's it doesn't make you feel accountable to it, but it makes you feel like that's what you were put on, like that's what this platform was for. Even if it's one or two people, that's one or two people who hopefully will have a smile on their face at the end of the day.
100%.
Yeah.
And I feel that on that control that you're talking about, I think that's such a huge lesson in the sense of just like, I think sometimes, especially when it's like loved ones and you see loved ones doing certain things and then you think you're not controlling, but you're trying to give advice, and then you take that personal and then kind of coming back and being like, yeah, at the end of the day, like I can only control my actions and behaviors and then see what's happening and support. Then I feel like that's also been a part of my journey in the sense of like, we're looking at like childhood wounds of like going back and being like, okay, like what was the upbringing that my parents had in the sense of like, how did my grandparents parent them, right? And what was the circumstances that they developed the certain coping mechanisms or the parenting styles that they had, to be like, okay, cool, like I'm understanding you more as a human and why you act in the certain ways, or why even in relationships, whether that's romantic, you're drawn to certain things like that, and be like, okay, cool, like I'm getting it. And it's not, I feel like when I'm able to peel that back, and I'm like, okay, I'm not taking this personal, and be like, that's that coping mechanism, that's a survival tactic, and like that was a thing that person's trying to do in the moment. So yeah, right there.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I remember like how much I would, blame certain parents or people in my life for things. And then when I heard stories from the other end, I just broke down. I was just like, how could I be so selfish in that moment? Because like, that's all I knew. All I thought was how they were acting towards me. But like, I never considered that part that you were talking about there. And it's just...
It just like opens. It's like, whoa.
My world was so small. It was like, my cereal's not here. You hate me. But like, I mean, it's a little bit, but like, I start seeing that they were giving me all they could. And I just, I appreciate that. And that's the thing, is that in my mind, I built up these things, and, a lot of them were hurtful. But at the same time, like most of the time, people are doing the best that they can in those instances when they don't necessarily mean to. And that's why you never get, or you may not get the apology that you're expecting, because they didn't realize as well. They were just doing the best they could, and that happened to be the outcome that you remembered for the rest of your life. So, that's where we be at. Yeah, so...
Nice.
Man, this has been so cool. This has been so cool. Like, I was just on my toes most of the time, because I was just so intrigued by how your mind works. Oh. And I don't know if you're like... I mean, you're still so young as well, and like... Well, people say we're young, and even though you're feeling old all the time, you have the ability that you have just to be someone who wants to go in and just listen and have that humility, I think is a huge value, or a huge personality trait that I think will get you far. And I know that you don't really want to go far, and that's not what you're thinking about, but in terms of being the person who is going to be able to actually make sizable change, or even be someone who people are going to want on their team, I think that is a very, very essential skill. And there's people who are given the gift to be able to do that sort of stuff, and I truly believe that you are one of those people. And I don't say that lightly, but just the conversation that we've had, the feeling that I get from being around you, I truly believe that that's something that has been gifted. And I'm happy to see all the stuff that you're doing.
Oof.
It's so awesome.
Thank you. I feel that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And so there's one final question that I ask everyone at the end, and it usually leads on to like more questions. But it's one thing that you do for yourself almost every day, or close to every day. It could be like getting out, making your bed, or something that makes you feel like you're on top of the day.
Okay. I think for me, so the first thing, again, we're just not going to overthink it, is like gratitude. So that's something I've tried to incorporate that's morning and night. So then I think it's just, again, a really good exercise of just like reflecting back, and then also setting intentions for the day of like, this is how I want to feel going forward and stuff. And then I think that just it definitely makes a difference when I don't do it.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah. Especially with the intention setting of just how do I want to feel about this day that we're going forward to. And I'm like,
So for your intentions, like, are there specific words that you like to use, or is it more like a vibe thing, or?
I think it depends if there's bigger like projects happening, or if there's just intent, like if there's certain things that are coming up, or if it's just like, what do I want to get out of the day from a feeling point of view, then it's just like, sometimes there's certain patterns that pop up, but Is this
a verbal sort of thing, or do you write it down, or?
So usually I say it in my head.
Yeah.
Or if I don't think anyone can hear me, then I'll say it out loud and stuff. But yeah, it just depends. Yeah. I find with the writing, I just found when I was writing it, like that's when I started to slack off on it. Right. So then I was like, okay, cool. Like we can verbally just say it.
Because
like
you
it's
have
like when
more
I wake
steps
up.
in place. Yeah. Right. So when you said you start to notice when you're not doing it, what were the things that you were noticing about yourself or your whole order when you weren't doing it?
It just like didn't feel as like centered, if that makes sense, or I just didn't feel like I was getting as much out of it. And I feel like once you set that intention of like the kind of day that you want to have, or like, I don't know, maybe the kind of connections that you want to build, I don't know, again, it can be a lot of different things, then it's just like, then that's kind of always on the front of your mind, and then you kind of leave, and then when you're reflecting back on the day or doing the gratitude, be like, cool, that ended up happening.
That's cool.
And then that's what you end up focusing on, which is cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I think as long as you're doing it and you're doing the practice, it doesn't matter how you're doing it. Like a lot of people like to say, you need to write it out. But it's just like, you said before, there are people who are going to prefer to do different things, and if it's working for them, it's working.
All good.
And we just go with that. Caitlin, gosh, that was the fast hour. Okay, right. What? That kind of just flew, and I don't know how your energy's feeling now, but I hope I was able to contribute to that energy and make it very, very good. But thank you so much for coming in for this chat.
Thank you for having me.
I hope people listen to this and really just get the vibe from you that, we're just here to learn, to be able to take things in, and if you don't know the answer, that's not the end of the world. We just have to continue to better ourselves when we go into those different spaces. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And I appreciate your time. Cheers.